Hi, this is Doug Wolf from Boise State University, and today we're going to take a look at how to create a display by pulling data from a table. So pulling multiple rows and columns of data out of a table and displaying it on the screen, like you might want for a pop-up reference page, or you might want for something like a high score list. Okay, I have a table here of Spanish vocabulary. No, I am not a foreign language teacher, but I wanted to use some fairly real content. And so in the first column, we have Spanish words for various colors, and in column 2, we have the English equivalents. And let me show you what happens when we run the game. We have a little title up here that says colores, and we have the two columns of data side by side, so you can see the English equivalents for these Spanish terms. So how do we get it to do that? All right, we talked about the table. Let me show you. The title is just a simple actor here with a simple display text. The two columns are put together in a similar way. Both of them really just have a display text, but you'll see that I put it inside of a rule that says if game.tableTextReady is true, then we go and display the text. And the reason for that is that the code has to go through a bunch of iterations to build the text that's going to go into that actor. And in theory, if we just use display text, then the actor should update as we're updating the text, as we're building that display, and it should all happen very quickly. But in practice, what I found happens is that quite often you either get none of the text or only some of the text displaying, but you almost never get all the text displaying because there's something quirky about the way Gamesalad is processing things. And so to get around that problem, I'm using a little flag here. Game.tableTextReady is a Boolean that I've defined over here in the game attributes. And so I use that as a little flag, and when we're ready, then I set it to true so that we do the display text, and then everything works smoothly. Okay, so the column 2 text is set up in exactly the same way, just it's displaying the column 2 text instead of column 1 text. And column 1 text and column 2 text are both attributes I've defined as part of the game, as well as counter 1, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, most of the code that makes this happen is actually in this actor that's off screen. And this actor is one that I've just named general code, and I'm using it because the code that we're using is something that applies to both the column 1 actor and the column 2 actor. And it doesn't really make sense to put it in one actor or the other. It's really some code that goes with this whole scene. And so I've put it in its own separate off-screen actor so that I've got a place that I can park any kind of general code that isn't specific to a particular actor. It's just an organizational tip, and makes it easier for you later on if you're looking for where a piece of code might be. It gives you one place to go for a lot of these general kinds of things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop open the backstage area here so you can see a little bit better. The basic idea behind how we're going to put this together is that we're going to use a code loop to assemble the text. The function that allows you to pull text out of a table only lets you get one cell worth of data at a time, and so you have to keep repeating things. You have to go and say, I want row 1, column 1, I want row 1, column 2, I want row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2. And that would be very tedious if you had to list all those steps separately. So what we use is a loop. We use the same basic set of code, and we just keep repeating it again and again and again. But the first time through we say, let's grab row 1, the second time, let's grab row 2, and the third time, row 3, and so on until we're done. So the way we do that involves using a counter, and that counter will start at 1. We're going to grab those values for row 1 from the table, and then we'll increment the counter by 1, so the counter becomes 2, and then we run through the code again, and we and we grab all the data from row 3, and we keep doing that, keep incrementing the counter and then grabbing the data from that row of the table. Now, most programming environments have commands for creating loops, but unfortunately the Windows version of Gamesalad does not yet have them. I was actually kind of shocked to discover that about Gamesalad. The Mac version is one version ahead of the PC version, and so it does have a loop behavior in it, but there is no loop behavior in the Windows version. But the method I'm going to show you will work for both the PC and the Mac versions. If you're on the Mac version, you can either use this, or if you'd like to learn about the loop behavior, you can save yourself some coding by using that. It'll save you quite a few lines of code. But the principle behind it is the same as what we're going to do here. So even though Gamesalad doesn't give you a loop behavior in the Windows version, we can make our own, and just take a little bit of work. So the first code block that we have here is just for initializing some variables. So if game time is equal to 0, so if the game is just at the beginning, then we want to set game.counter.1 to 1. So this is our counter, we're going to set it to 1, and set game.table text ready to false. Now those this step, strictly speaking, isn't absolutely necessary because you can set those same values when you set up the attributes for the game over here. But I like to do it in the code so that you know for sure that you have set them to what you want, and if you want to edit them later, it puts it all there right with your other code, and so you can edit right at that point. And it also, in case you accidentally change something in the game attributes, this will set them to what they really need to be. So that's what that is, and I'm going to go collapse that now to get it out of our way. Okay, now let's look at the loop. We first need a rule, and that rule is that if game.counter1 is less than or equal to, and then we have this expression over here, and this expression is just using a function called table row count, and that is telling us how many rows are in our table. So if game.counter1 is less than or equal to the number of rows in the table, then we're going to execute some code. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, what are we going to do? Well, we need to take the steps that we're going to do and put them in what is called a zero timer. This is the way that we get Gamesalad to keep repeating our code over and over again. A zero timer is just a timer that has been set so that it says every 0 seconds do something, and we check the run to completion box. By setting it to happen every 0 seconds, what Gamesalad will actually do is it will just go through this code as quickly as it can. I mean, obviously it's going to take it more than 0 seconds to do something. Okay, so inside this timer, then we're going to repeat 3 things over and over and over. First, we're going to get the entry for the current row, so whichever row we're working on, first, second, third, fourth row, we're going to get the entry for that row out of the table, and we're going to add it to our text variable. And then we're going to get the entry for the current row that's in column 2, that's this part here. And then the third part is we're going to increment the game counter so that we'll grab the next row of data on our next time through this loop. All right, so the way we build the first column of text is that we set this game attribute game.column1 text to be equal to the following expression, which unfortunately you can't see the whole thing here. But I'll quickly run through it and then I'll build it for you so you can see how we build it. So I'm going to take game.column1 text, and then I'm going to concatenate it, which means to join a bit of text with another bit of text. That's called concatenating in computer programming. And you use 2 periods. These 2 little periods here are the operator for concatenating 2 bits of text together. So we'll take the game.column1 text, we'll concatenate it with the table cell value from column 1 for our current row. Okay? And then at the end of the whole thing, we're going to concatenate it with a line break. And this /n is the code for create a new line. So it's like a carriage return character. You can also supposedly use a \r, but I have found on the PC version that doesn't seem to work. I think that may be a Mac versus PC difference, because there are some differences in what Macs and PCs consider to be a valid end-of-line character. And so I think that the Windows side just doesn't like the \r. And again, I use little concatenation symbols, and we enclose that in quotation marks because it is a text string, and the quotation marks tell Gamesalad that it's a text string as opposed to some bit of code or something. So let me build this for you so you can see how we do that. So I'm going to take our variable and I'm going to add to it. So each time we go through, we're going to take the variable, we're going to add something onto the end of it. So we take column 1 text. Oops. Hang on to that. Yeah, it gave me 2 copies. Okay. I'm going to take column 1 text, and then we need to come back here and we need the 2 dots for concatenation. Okay. So we're going to join it with the next thing, and we're looking for a function that's called table cell value. Okay, and table cell value needs to know what table it's supposed to get its values from. So that table is under here under game, and it's called Spanish vocab. And I'll have to scroll over here. And then it needs to know what row of the table. And remember, for the row, we're using the counter. So game.counter1 is the row number that we're going to use. And then the column, well, this is the text from column 1, so I just need to put a 1 here. Okay, and then to keep from having all the text just all appearing in one single line, I need to put a line break between. So that's my concatenation symbol again, 2 periods, open quotation mark, \n, and close the quotation mark. Okay, and then the text for column 2 is set up basically the same way, except that we're using the column 2 text, and inside the expression, when we're grabbing the table cell value, we're going to be grabbing it from column 2 rather than from column 1. And everything else about it is the same. And then finally down here, we just add 1 to game.counter.1. Okay, so the way this works then is that when we first go through this, game.counter.1 is equal to 1, which is less than or equal to the number of rows in our table. So we come down into the timer, and it will go and add the first entry to column 1 text, add the first entry from column 2 to the column 2 text, and then we increment game counter, so we add 1 to it, and so game counter 1 now becomes equal to 2. Okay, that still fulfills our condition. It's still less than the number of rows, so we go and we do this again, but this time we're grabbing game.column1 text, which will have, if we look at our table, it will already have rojo in it, and then we will add the next entry to it, because we'll be now looking at row 2, which will add anaranjado to it. And the same thing for the column 2 text, and then we increment this so that it becomes game.counter1 becomes 3, and we keep going through until we've gotten through all 8 rows in the table. And after that 8th row, when we add 1 to our counter, it now has a value of 9. And so we get up here to this statement: if game.counter1 is less than or equal to, well, it's now equal to 9, which is not less than or equal to the number of rows in our table. It's now greater than. So we're not going to do what's in the do part. We instead drop down to the else part of the code. And down in the else part of the code, we just set that flag that I had, game.tableTextReady, to true. And then that goes and tells my other actors that display the text that now is the time to display the text. So let's just take one more look at how that runs. Now, one last detail. The reason that I used the number of rows in the table up here as opposed to just simply typing in an 8 because I have 8 rows in my table is what happens if I add more data to my table. So let's say I add 2 rows and add Rosado, which is pink, and Marron, which is brown. Okay, and now let's go ahead and run the game. And you'll see everything adjusted it itself. I didn't have to go in and mess with my code at all because the code it knows how many times to run through the loop based on how many entries or how many rows are in the table. And we could go back and we could delete these 2 rows, and we can run the game again, and we're back to what we had before. Okay, so that is how you can pull text from a table to create a display and how to use loops to do that. I will post a copy of this code up on the course site for you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.